thank everybody for spending a little time here at the museum tonight. Hopefully, and find that you'll learn a few things. Obviously, hope you enjoy it. My name is Charlie Hansen, and I got involved. What we're talking about tonight is kind of great fun for me because we're going beyond the usual, not for sure what happened with the Great Fire. And I want to compliment the curator, Sadie Thayer, over here with the video camera, because she's bold enough to take the issue of the Great Ellensburg Fire and try to move it forward, and I hope I can be of help doing that. I had a career in the fire service. I'm born and raised in Tacoma, and I also like to introduce my wife Susie here. She somehow comes to stuff like this and enjoys it with me. She'll be running the computer for me. Had a career in the Tacoma Fire Department, retired years go by now. It's been about 12 years or so. And without going into too much detail, I worked at several jobs, and I did do a lot of fire investigations in my day. Hi, welcome. Come on in. Come on in. I'm Charlie, and we're just getting started. The first time I knew about the Ellensburg fire, I was volunteering for the PTA, and anybody that's been around here knows that years ago the PTA used to come every year in the winter and have a big convention over at the college. And I wound up wandering into the museum and meeting the curator at that time and just discussing the Great Ellensburg fire. Later in my career, I found out, gee whiz, well, we all knew Seattle had a great fire. It was June 6th of 1889. And I found out Vancouver, Washington had a great fire, June 20th, 1889. And I found out Ellensburg had a great fire, July 4th, 1889. And then I found out Spokane Falls had their great fire, August 4th, 1889. And so for years it kind of, geez, you know, that's a lot of fires. And so I got way too deep. And Ellensburg's fire is totally the most fascinating. And I wouldn't let it go years ago if I thought it was an accident. I don't anymore. I had the privilege of speaking here about 3 years ago on the topic of was it an accident or was it on purpose? And in tonight's presentation, I will review that to see where I'm coming from, and why, in fact, I want to present tonight on the next level of a fire investigation. And that is, you know, if you're going to do a fire investigation, it's like being a doctor in the sense of you never go in thinking it was on purpose. You always go in thinking it was an accident. And then you eliminate things, like a doctor will eliminate what's not wrong with you. Well, fire investigations, you eliminate all of the accidental possibilities before you say to yourself, geez, I think a human got involved. And that, amazingly, I believe, is clearly the case in the Ellensburg fire. So we'll review briefly the history of the fire and what got me to claim or put forward that it was no accident. So we'll briefly review the fire. And for fire investigations, forget arson, just any fire investigation, you want to find out the cause and the origin. So we'll briefly review the cause and the origin of this fire, and then we're going to take it, the fun part will go from there, because I'm going to stand here and try to tell you that it was no accident. So okay, if it's no accident, then what do you do? Well, then you get into today's presentation, motive, means, and opportunity. Somebody started that fire. How, why, when, what, where. We don't know all the answers. I'll try to review as what the historical record indicates, and we'll give you an overview of many of the players that were either mentioned in the historical record. Well, we'll leave it at that. The players that were mentioned in the historical record. And we'll look at them as persons of interest. I have to say, for years I worked with a police detective, Dave Antonson, and he taught me, because I was no policeman, but he taught me that we are truth seekers. So I don't want you to think I'm looking for the bad guy. What I'm looking for is how, you know, who's not the bad guys. So we're looking for the truth. You're not going to walk out of here tonight with me telling you who done it. But we're gonna add a layer of historical records to the possibilities. We'll talk at the end. We'll talk a little bit about the lasting impacts of the fire, and certainly leave time for questions and answers. With that, I guess we might as well dim the lights. I gotta stand back on the other side here so we can see the screen. So I'll get myself out of the way. Around here. Thanks. So I'll call the presentation tonight, Motive Means an Opportunity. Seeking the truth, and that's a tip of the cap to my old partner. Seeking the truth behind the great Ellensburg fire of 1889. This is actually downtown Seattle at that time, and I said briefly there was 4 big fires all compressed together. So much so that if you don't count wartime, there's never been so many fires so close together that did so much damage in American history. So to put it in perspective, matter of fact, the insurance industry called it the year of evil destiny. Counting our fires, New York had one, Boston in a couple of years, but it was the year of evil destiny. That's how many fires there were. So this is what it looked like prior to their fire. And Seattle had the biggest one. It was, Seattle was the biggest city. I think and there's the fire starts. This fire we know was accidental. It was a Swedish immigrant working in a wood factory. He tipped over a glue pot in the middle of a work day, and things didn't go well. And led to burning the town down. And I have to mention, would you back it up once? I have to compliment the Ellensburg Fire Department. The beautiful piece of apparatus over here on our left. That is a magnificent hose cart. And I understand a week ago they actually pulled it out and
they brought it into the building.
To bring it in?
Yeah.
And that was actually originally used by men to pull it. Or in some cases women if the men were gone. That was not meant for horses. In fact, the fire service was not they were not pro-horse, nor were they pro-steamers, nor were they pro the next change or the next change. But anyway, there's a good image. That painting is off the Mohai Museum wall in Seattle, the Museum of History and Industry. This, I got a laser pointer, great. It's not about the bottom picture, it's up here. This is no longer there. That was a fancy hotel in Tacoma, and those people are looking north over Tacoma, and that is the lurid sky of the Seattle fire burning, seen from Tacoma. This is a Harper's Magazine artist. They were excellent artists, so I think it's a pretty fair image. We will, if I forget to say it, I'll say it now. The Ellensburg fire was seen from Yakima, North Yakima at the time. So there's just an idea of what an artist thought it looked like of seeing a big old fire. That's pretty awesome. And so that was a Seattle fire. And of course it raised the ruckus around the Northwest. Oh my gosh, watch out for bad guys, for arson. It turned out that was accidental. 2 weeks later, Vancouver, Washington Territory, and this is the old Fort Vancouver down near the Columbia River. And, oh, that's okay, go ahead and take care of it. And this little building here was the old abandoned St. James Catholic Church on the property. And on the night of June 20th, that was torched. So the military and the Vancouver Fire Service came over there and fought that fire. In the meantime, now I know it says North Yakima's first fire engine. If you could bear with me, I just put this one up to show you what a beautiful little steamer looked like. In the meantime, so the fire in the church is burning. They get that fire put out. They go back to the station with a steamer like this, the pride and joy of the Vancouver Fire Department. Ellensburg didn't have one. Most towns did not have one. Some did. Vancouver had one. And these things, to this day, these things will pump as much water as a modern fire engine. These things are amazing. And thanks to this, or one just like it, and the military and their organization, the military in Vancouver, the military fought one side of the fire. A big pumper like this stopped the fire on another side, and those were the two main sides, and Portland brought one of these over. So they stopped their fire pretty well. It was a good story about the firefight. For our purposes, it was clearly declared an arson. They had some characters set 2 or 3 fires in the back of these stores, and they used them. They set the fires with kerosene and Excelsior. And I had to do, Excelsior. What's Excelsior? But I had to look it up. Excelsior is willow shavings that he would pack stuff in. So that was Excelsior. So it was a known arson fire. So that was just 2 weeks later, June 20th. Then we go to July 4th. And let's set the scene here in Ellensburg prior to the fire. We have 3rd Street, which we're on, looking west. If you all look to the left, from Pine Street to the railroad depot. In other words, right this minute, we're probably right over in here. And here's J.B. Fogarty's grocery store. Fogarty shows up in the history books later. And then we have a couple other buildings, and then there's a big Nelson Bennett merchandise store. And that's important to our story because my eyewitness was the manager of that store. This is what it was like before the fires. Let's just say it's the 4th of July right now. We know that year it was hot, it was dry, it was windy, there was a drought. People were worried. They had banned fireworks because Seattle burned. Nothing to do with fireworks, but you know how it is with fireworks. We're gonna, so they had no fireworks in town, and kind of in sympathy to Seattle.
Well, the Seattle fire was later, wasn't it? 2 days later?
No, Seattle fire was June 6th.
Oh, June 6th.
Now and then Vancouver was June 20th. Now we're at July 4th. This is the old Johnson house, which it was fairly modern, except by 1889 it was looking old. It was wood construction, had a big dance hall up in here. And even back in those days, Ellensburg itself was a convention. One of its nicknames was Convention City. It had an amazing number of nicknames. One of them was Convention City. Ellensburg was the Pittsburgh of the West. It was the Denver of the West. It was all the time. It was the capital city because there was very legitimate reason to think Ellensburg would become the state capital. Now we're down here, and here's the railroad line. And in wanting to be the state capital, real estate people had donated what they said would look like this one of these days. It doesn't yet. It's getting there. This is going to be Captain Craig's Hills over this way. But this was not uncommon. Anybody who got anything from the government tended to offer free land or free something to, it's not out of it. You almost had to offer something to get government buildings or government. But we'll get to that a little bit later. That's what it was like before the fire. And the circus was in town, the Sells Brothers Circus. And the Sells Brothers Circus set up near Craig's Hill, which apparently had just been renamed Capitol Hill. And then you're mostly probably aware of the governor's mansion further up the road, which the gentleman who built it was interviewed and was asked, is this supposed to be for the governor? And he was coy about it and said, well, we'll see what time brings. It wasn't looking just like it does nowadays, but fairly similar. So the circus in town, unfortunately the wind was blowing so hard they could not get the big top up. And in researching, I don't think you understand how big a big top was. It was bigger than a football field. Bigger than a football field.